John and Ryan were having trouble logging on with the info on the agenda, so I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have shared my invite with them, but now they're all on as Mitch Haas.
Oh, that's okay. We can change their names.
Okay.
Okay, 5:30. Open up the meeting for board. Meeting of April 4th, Pickens County Board of Adjustment. In attendance is Seth, Charlie, Rick, and Charlie, and Christoph.
Christoph's remote.
And the first applicant is a tabled first application we had this year is 01 of 23, the Choi Family Trust requesting a front and rear yard setback on the former Sharon Khan property. It's in the R15 zone, 35,000 square feet. And do you have your notice of posting, Mitch Haas, who's representing the applicant?
Yes, I uploaded all of that to the county sages back before the March 14th date.
Okay, let the record reflect that that has occurred. And you have the floor, my friend.
All right, it's the time. Thank you. Well, I'm going to kind of run through more or less what was in the application I'd submitted and a couple other little points, I think. And then, as always, happy to answer questions or respond to any concerns. I suppose I can start here with sharing the screen. Move us over to one side. All right, I assume everybody, yep, I see that now on the screen. So here's just a map, our property. So you've got West Hopkins, the bike path that's in the city of Aspen, right? And South 7th Street comes in down here. The subject property is this little lot back here. Access to it is taken from 7th Street along a 20-foot wide easement that comes right along this property line to here. So that, again, I'll leave that there for now. As Rick mentioned, we are in the R15 zone district. The applicants are the Choi Family Trust, and we've already been through a long or protracted activity envelope and site plan review that resulted in an approval, during which we had to spend quite some time postponing the review process or the approval being written up while we worked out issues and easements agreements with this property owner here right next door, where our access goes through their lot. We had also worked ahead of that process with this property owner, who never objected to anything because they've been on board from the beginning. And during this variance application, I've heard from the owners of this property across the street and spoken to them. They have no real concerns. They were just curious about it. So, as Rick mentioned, the property is about 35,109 square feet. You can see the shape of it is a little bit odd, and I'll show you some other images in a minute because the shape is severely constrained as well.
Mitch, was this Hans Gramago's property years ago?
No.
This is Hans. Right
Sharon
here.
Khan.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, this was Rick, exactly. The Khan's family owned it, and then the Choi's bought it, I want to say in 2019, maybe?
Okay, thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So the property is developed now. You can see it a little better if I turn off the contours. There we go. With several structures. There's 3 separate structures, all of which are non-conforming. There's a multi-story residence, a 2-story which sits right here. There's a 2-story shed you can't see very well in the trees right here, and a 2-story garage / apartment over in this corner. In addition, there's a concrete wall that sits right in here that was originally meant as an avalanche and rock fall barrier, but we've studied the property and hired the right engineers, and that barrier does nothing, doesn't provide any protection at all. All of these will be demolished to make way for a new single-family home. The multi-story residence here, let me switch over to this. These might make that bigger. It's not jumping. There we go. Okay. So the existing residence, bear with me. These blue outlines, blue dotted lines are the existing buildings. So you can see the existing residence as it sits encroaches into the front setback area as well as the rear setback area. The two-story garage caretaker sits entirely in the rear setback, as does the tall shed structure entirely in the rear setback and that concrete wall. All of these, like I said, will be removed and taken off the property. All of these structures were legally established, built with permits and issued certificates of occupancy. The original shed structure over here was first built without any permits, but was later legitimized through a Board of Adjustment variance that was granted for it and then given a certificate of occupancy. So the reason you could see here, the red shows you the area of the property that complies with the setback requirements. The entire easterly side of the property that you see from this is our activity envelope line here. Down here is, so everything within this area is inside the activity envelope. And then this area between the two is an area just for mitigation of hazards, activity envelope, and then site restoration. Everything on the east side of this dark line is unbuildable. It's too steep. It's subject to avalanche hazards. It's subject to rockfall hazard, and it's a severe wildfire hazard area. So everything about it, the county code says prohibited from development, pushed all the development to the easterly portion of the property as a result, which is also where the existing property has been disturbed and keeps the redevelopment in the previously disturbed areas. So the reason everything built on this property encroaches into the setbacks today is simple. It's because it's an unusually narrow and shallow triangular shaped lot with abundant site-specific environmental and topographic constraints. The result of which required pushing all development into that narrow portion on the westerly side of the property, where the setbacks leave insufficient area to accommodate the permitted structures or allowable floor area of the property. This has been recognized by the county in the past, and the reason all of these structures have been granted variances previously. I should point out, when I mention what's allowed on the property, the zoning allows for 5,617 square feet of floor area above grade, and being inside the urban growth boundary, there's also the rights for another 4,000 square feet of subgrade and 750 of garage. So in other words, the gross maximum size of a house permitted by zoning here is 10,367 square feet. What we've got approved through activity envelope and site plan review is up to 8,250 with the use of one TDR. We may or may not use the TDR depending just on prices and availability. But regardless, the building footprint does not change whether we're at 5,750 or 8,250. It just affects where floors are and what happens subgrade. But the footprint of the building would be exactly the same. So as I said here, we've gone over the entire easterly side of the property is undevelopable, and pushed everything to the other side. The whole property has severe wildfire hazard risk, but the county approved expert in wildfires suggestion was push it all to the westerly side because it's the safest of the wildfire risk comparable to the rest of the property. So Again, that red triangle is the only area that would comply. It's clearly too narrow to allow for development of what's allowed on the property. In total, the primary constraints affecting the property are steep slopes, rockfall, avalanche, wildfire hazards, all direct appropriate mitigated development to the same area. The existing structures are already located here again, so that's keeps us where, as the county code directs you, to the previously disturbed areas to begin with. So in addition to the Chapter 7 constraints that force development to the west half of the parcel, or real west a third of the parcel, whatever it is, the parcel also has the unusual shape that makes full compliance with the setbacks impractical or impossible. The minimum front yard and rear yard setbacks are 30 feet, as reflected by the red triangle. And the required side yard setback is 15 feet from, so this is our front up here, this is our rear, and that's our side yard there. The west side property line here is only 62.5 feet long. So it leaves on this end of the property, if I switch over, there we go, all of 4'3" and change to work with. In the middle of that envelope that would comply with setbacks, it's only 18 feet deep. And the very widest portion is only 32 feet and 3 inches. Clearly, that's not a sufficient area to develop without some relief from the setbacks. So as I pointed out in the application, due to the unusually narrow shape of the parcel or developable area and the topographic and geologic hazards affecting the site, the applicant is asking the Board of Adjustment for relief to enable development consistent with the recently approved activity envelope and site plan. To be compatible with the neighborhood development patterns and be sensitive to the immediate neighbors, all of whom we've spoken to and worked things out with, the replacement home has been designed to provide a 10-foot front yard setback, which maybe I should switch to that. There we go. To replace, so the red here is showing the portion of the building, the design that was approved through site plan review, the portion of it in the front setback. And then back here, the portions, the encroachments into the rear setback. Again, the blue dots are the existing structures that'll be removed. So we've designed that the house was designed to provide a 10-foot front yard setback and a 25-foot rear yard setback, with the only exceptions being, exceptions being further reductions in the setbacks, being a pair of proposed site walls, these two little red spots you're seeing here, that are there to help with the desires of the Aspen Fire Protection District for fire access reasons and to accommodate drainage requirements. These two walls might actually end up complying with the setbacks, but we're not to the level of detail where we know where the precise height measurements will fall. So they might be over 30 inches in the setback area. They might not. So our feeling was just to be conservative, we might as well include them in the variance request rather than get to the permit level of drawings and find out we need a variance and didn't get it for those two little parts of the walls. So moving on to the, you're all more than well familiar with the standards, the standard for a variance request, whereby a reason of unusual narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of enacting the regulations, or by reason of unusual topographic conditions, or other situation or condition of the property, we can agree then on one of those reasons that the strict application of the setback regulations would result in a peculiar or practical difficulty or hardship for the applicant. Conformance with the zone district standards for front and side yard setbacks is not feasible for this property due to those reasons: unusual narrowness, shallow shape, triangular shape of the property, and abundant site-specific environmental and topographic constraints. that require pushing the development into this narrow piece of the property. They're set, it's. Again, we're following on the heels of a property that's been recognized before by the County Board of Adjustment in granting variances as having all of these constraints. And being too narrow and having hardship as a result of these site-specific constraints. Skipping through, so not only the site constraints present, but the property's only access is coming through this little easement. And then once you get to the property, we're required to provide an area for a fire truck to turn around. So that even further narrowed the red area that we looked at before, making this portion of it in here unavailable for the structure, because we needed an area for a fire truck to be able to pull in, turn back up, and then pull straight back out. So holding the property to the strict application of the zone setback limitations would very much result in peculiar practical difficulties to and undue hardship upon the applicant, as there would be no conceivable way to realize the recognized and accepted development rights associated with this property. Clearly, granting of relief from the strict application of the zone setbacks is needed here to enable development of a home that is consistent with neighborhood character and the standard rights afforded by the zoning. Granting of the requested relief will not cause detriment to the public good, nor will it impair the intent or purposes of the Aspen Area Community Plan or of the Land Use Code. If any such detriment or impairment would result, then the activity and site plan review never would have been approved. Indeed, the activity envelope, site plan review approval, administrative decision states right in it as its 6th recital that the site plan would not cause any detriment to the public good, nor will it impair the intent or purposes of the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan or the Land Use Code. So that finding for this proposed development has already been made by the county. The variance request meets the criteria established in section 240.110. We believe should be approved accordingly. Without the requested variances, the property is practically undevelopable, and the applicant would be forced to work within the footprints of the existing structures, which, unless the height limit is raised to 4 stories or so, does not allow for development of the floor area permitted on the property. The applicant, however, the existing structures that are there and working with them would not provide for safety because they are not mitigated against the hazards of avalanche or rockfall or wildfire hazard, meaning they cannot be considered safe as they exist. So the approved redevelopment plans accommodate all necessary hazard mitigation and are therefore a great improvement relative to the health, welfare, and safety requirements of the Land Use Code. And as an additional result, these 4 existing structures will be removed, and their encroachments will be removed. As you know, the code allows you to maintain those encroachments, which are entirely in the rear yard for a lot of it. But we're not maintaining those, we're bettering the situation relative to the rear setback. So we believe it represents a significant improvement. Because of that, I was a little surprised by the lone objection we received to this request, which came in the form of a letter delivered yesterday. The letter asked for building elevations, saying the application is not complete without building elevations. To that, I would say our building elevations have been a matter of public record for over a year now and remain that. They were provided with the activity envelope and site plan review, for which the same objector received public notice, and they still remain a matter of public record. That and all they're going to show you is that we're complying with the height limits. So there is no actual code requirement for building elevations in this application, which was deemed complete. The objection seem to speak to us saying that we should get the variance because of unusual narrowness or shallowness, and that's it. That is clearly not the case. Our application talks about unusual shallowness and narrowness in addition to topographic constraints and severe environmental hazards that push development into the narrow, shallow portion of the property. So clearly we're talking about the standard in the code also speaks to the language of or by reason of unusual topographic conditions or other situation or condition on the property, which we have addressed. The lot width is a dimensional requirement that's measured only along a front yard setback line. And its usual purpose in zoning regulation is for purposes of defining whether a lot or parcel is a legal conforming parcel or a non-conforming parcel. You decide a conformity of a parcel by lot width and lot size. While it's a novel and kind of creative argument that was in the objection, it's flawed and incomplete. The argument attempts to stress that the lot width concept to say we've made matters worse on ourselves and created a self-induced hardship by proposing the resident on the nearest and western boundary. But that whole point seems to ignore the rest of our application a little conveniently, or acknowledge the significant avalanche, rockfall, steep slopes, and wildfire hazards that plague the rest of the property. The hazard avoidance or safety is always the precedent or priority in citing a residence and approving its activity envelope and site plan. And in this case, it clearly forced development to the westerly side of the lot. All setback requirements along with hazard avoidance have to be considered in tandem. One cannot just look at a single lot line and wear blinders to all of these other relevant facts. Besides, these constraints and our requested variance result in a home that's pushed closer to the front lot line, which is farthest away from the neighbor who's objecting. I'm going to switch back here. Whoops. The objection comes from this property owner. So you would think pushing to the front of the lot would be getting further from them. But that the objection also claims that we have put our development as 10 pounds of development in a 5-pound bag. To that, I would say, given the zoning allows 10,367 square feet of area in a house on this lot, and we're at 8,250 or less, that means we're at 80% of the zone development rights. In other words, mathematically speaking, we're proposing less than 4 pounds in a 5-pound bag in the 5-pound bag. 4 is 80% of 5. Finally, I'd say that the architectural elevations, like I said, are a matter of public record. The review process for that activity envelope and site plan went on for over a year, during which time we spoke to our neighbors on both sides and their attorneys and planners. We achieved support from one and worked with the other so that there was no objections. We've worked out a detailed agreement with one of those neighbors. And we've resolved all issues to the level where staff could give the approval without requiring a hearing officer review. I don't know where the 3 trees neighbors were during all of that, but they did not speak up at all during that over a year process. Anyway, they don't need elevations to understand that there will be no direct or visible impacts to the owners of the 1 Toby Lane property over here. As you can see there, this house sits some 390 horizontal feet from our rear property line and 110 vertical feet above us. And the intervening area has this large house in between and a very dense, mature evergreen forest as well. From this house, you cannot see the development on this property. So we know there's no impacts to them. I don't see any purpose in continuing the hearing for them to look at elevations. It's simply unnecessary and unwarranted. They say they want a continuance because they'd like to work with us to understand the development better. They've yet to contact me about anything. We've been working on this for a year and a half or so now. Now they want to work with me from a letter submitted yesterday. What would have happened if we went forward, if I was not out of town on March 14th and we went forward with the hearing then? It would be done already. So it doesn't make sense to me, the whole request or objection. If they wanted to look at the elevations, all they had to do was call or email me. I would have immediately emailed them over to them. Just like I did for all the other neighbors. So again, I see no purpose in continuing this, and I find this application, I've worked on, I don't know how many properties in the county, but this to me is as clear cut a case of unusual site-specific constraints, hardship and practical difficulty required by the zoning or strict compliance with no negative impacts to anyone in granting the requested relief or variances. With that, I think I'll end and happy to answer questions or discuss as needed.
Thank you, Mitch. Very, very good presentation, I might add. Before I entertain public comments, if there are any people on that screen that would like to speak, I'll get to you in a second. I am a bit concerned that the board did not receive these objection letters in a timely fashion. This is the first I'm becoming aware of that. Are there any other objections that have been received? Bonnie?
This is the only one.
What was the reason we didn't receive this objection?
As noted, it came in the end of last week. The packets had already gone out. And so there's typically not a problem when somebody shows up at a meeting to object. And that's what's happening here.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that would want to make comment on this application?
We don't have anybody else online, so
Okay, great.
if there's anybody in the room.
I do. And hopefully I can speak to that. I'm Christine Gazda, so I submitted this letter. And apologies, I was told by staff that I could submit it up to today, or even just show up here with physical copies. And I do have copies, if it helps.
Well, Mitch pretty much outlined your objections.
He did, yeah. So I can keep this very brief. I'm not going to repeat what's in the letter. I just wanted to note that, the activity envelope and site plan approval and review process is separate, and that this board is a distinct body with distinct criteria. I appreciate that the elevation drawings were public record and part of that process. But per the Board of Adjustments website, elevation drawings, a copy of all building elevations of the structure requiring a variance are required in the application. So I think that's part of the objection here. We're not objecting to the variance request necessarily. It's just that no elevation drawings were included in this variance application. So it was difficult for my client, who owns 1 Toby Lane, to determine the impacts on their potential property, their property line, their view plane, without seeing those elevation drawings included in this application.
Christine, are you suggesting that we table this to accommodate your client with those elevations?
That's what's being requested, yes. Just so that we can review the elevation drawings and understand exactly what the height is of all the proposed structures.
What is the board's pleasure on this?
I would say if the structure complies with all zoning codes, that's all that's really relevant here. Because the neighbors, unless they have an HOA that is responsible for the property has really no say in what a neighbor builds. And I think it would be untoward for us to
Hold this up.
defer, you hold it up and defer to a neighbor that wants to see story poles or wants to see elevations. It's as stated, the elevations have been available. This party has a right to build here, and what they're building is already so constrained. I don't see how any other impacts on this property would be fair. Is how I would say it.
Seth, do you have any comment?
I agree with what Charles is saying. One of the questions I was gonna ask, Mitch, was for an architectural site plan, because it was really tough to see what's going on there. I understand what the building is, but I'd like to see a little bit more information. And I agree on like the heights, height variance, what we're looking at.
So just to be clear, are you requesting that the applicant provide more information so you can make a determination?
Well, if Mitch has got it, that you can bring up, that's fine for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Christoph, do you have any comment?
No, I mean, I would say just the site plan itself, that backyard setback looked like it was going through a red zone, but then I did see the building jog in that location. So for me, it's just more of confirming that the building is completely within that setback. Is the main thing, so. Which is indicated here on this plan.
Are you impacted by the objection letter? Do you think that has any merit?
I am not. I mean, I agree with Charlie and also Seth in regards to the hardships of this site, and that especially because they're building within the same general area of the disturbance already, and actually providing less structure within that rear yard setback, and condensing down the building into a single structure. So.
Thank you. Charlie, any comment?
No, I mean, I agree if it meets the code. And I guess a little concerned with why last minute when this has been available for them to view, all of a sudden the day before, now they want to see the elevations and so on.
Well, I would also say that even if height poles were there and they could see it, they still have no right to object to it. Because it's allowed to be where it is and as high as the code allows. Yeah.
I tend to agree. I can't see how this property would impact the objector's property. They're 100 feet above. It's one lot removed. This seems more of a nuisance than. So I'm not going to weigh very heavily the objection letter. Does the board have any questions of the applicant's representative?
I just have, sorry, I just have one question. So it's actually two separate variances here. One is for site walls that are going to be exceeding the 30 inches on the rear setback due to hazards. And then we have, which are within that setback, right? Your 25-foot setback or whatever it is there. And then the building is within the setback.
And the front yard setback.
Yeah, it's so let me just clarify. So this site wall is closer, the rear setback required is 30 feet. We designed the house to really try to stay within 25 foot. But so this little site wall, that one here, and then this piece of the back of the house in the rear.
Yeah.
And then this red is all in the front.
Okay.
Are there any other questions of the applicant?
If is there a clear synopsis of what a motion would include?
I think Mitch did a great job on enumerating the numerous hardships and practical difficulties that this lot's experiencing. not the least of which is wildfire, rockfall, steepness,
Topography.
unusual shape, geological concerns, so I'm sure we can craft a motion if we're headed in that direction. If anybody would
Well,
like
I could try
to.
to simplify it and say, I'd move to approve the variance requests, plural better, in this application as listed in the application because of the multiple challenges of this property, the hardships, the topographic hardships and the practical difficulties being named are overly apparent on this property.
All right, do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I couldn't see are you good with that?
Yeah, he said.
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
So you got unanimous approval on that, Mitch. And good luck on this project.
Well, thank you. All right, I appreciate your,
Thank you, Christine, for coming.
all right, well, have a good night. I should hit the stop share, I assume. There we go.
Thanks, Ned.
Anybody?
Next up.
Yeah, okay.
We're just gonna switch applications real quick and let them come in.
Yeah, that's,
Go
come on
ahead.
in, Alan. Here we go.
What do you want?
Get in the hot seat down there.
It was kept warm, wasn't it?
Yeah, no worries.
Oh my God, you're bringing in the big guns.
Oh, carefully.
You don't get to get out of your presentation by tripping.
Just take us a minute to set up the computer, if that's okay.
No worries.
Yeah, there's Christoph. Who else is here? Us.
Christoph and Joanna, we currently have no issues. She's fuzzy.
Fuzzy Joanna, hi there.
You all set? You guys all set up?
When Diana says she's set, I will
Yes, sir.
go, if that's okay. I'm technologically non-proficient.
They're old like me.
That would be another way of saying it. No, I know how to do my own computer in my own office and Zoom. Nuke.
Well, I think it's about as good as it's gonna get here.
Oh, that's good. Okay,
Looks like you guys are all set.
yes.
Okay, we're gonna open up case 04 of 23. Wherein the Lattermans are requesting a 60-foot major road setback in the R30 zone. And they are being represented by
Alan
Alan
Richmond.
Richmond, Joe Krabacher, and I'm sorry,
Diana Etlinger.
Diane Etler. Thank you.
Diane and Joe, both from Sherman and Howard.
Before we begin, are there any, did you provide us with your notice of posting?
I did. Here's the paper copy, just so you.
Reflect that that has occurred. Are there any objection letters or comments from any of the neighbors
Joanna?
that anybody's aware of?
I received no objection.
Terrific. All right.
I have a conflict. I did work on this project with the buyer, who I think he's backed out.
Yes.
So he's no longer working on it, but I do have that history.
I feel like you could preside over this
Absolutely.
impartiality.
Yep, no problem.
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, Alan, you have the floor.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're here requesting a variance from the Maroon Creek Road setback. The code requires structures to be set back by 100 feet from the road right away because
Maroon Creek Road is defined as a major road in the code. We are in activity envelope review, and we've created an activity envelope that's located 40 feet from the edge of the right of way. And that's the reason for the 60-foot variance, and we'll show you graphics on all of this. So we're starting with the vicinity map, which shows the property for which the variance is requested. Lot 19 is the one there in yellow. It's located directly across from Island Park. You see the fields there across Maroon Creek Road. It's about 41,500 square feet in size, which is just less than an acre of land. As Rick mentioned, it's zone R30, which has a minimum 30,000 square foot lot size. So this is a conforming size lot of record. If you can go to the second graphic, the lot was created more than 60 years ago. I believe it was 1960 that the plat was filed.
Sorry. Having a little problem accessing my, there we go.
There it is. There's the plat of the Aspen Highlands subdivision. There are 20 lots in the subdivision. Diane is highlighted lot 19, which is the subject lot. You can see it's right there along Maroon Creek Road. And you pull back just a bit, and you see there are actually 6 lots that front on Maroon Creek Road, and the rest of them are well further back than that. And I'll speak to that shortly. Could go to the third graphic, which is the survey of the property. There it is. So lot 19, it's undeveloped, but you see 2 small structures there. Basically right there, 2 structures that are old and dilapidated. And if you notice, this is lot 18. And that's the house on lot 18. So lot 18 and 19 have been owned together for quite some time. They were owned together by Deborah Bradford, who was the prior owner before my clients bought the property several years ago. My clients bought both properties from Miss Bradford, but those 2 structures, she used them, they're like sheds, and she really used the 2 lots as a single place, and left 19 undeveloped, but it is a subdivision lot. And we would expect those structures are going to be demolished whenever lot 19 is redeveloped. They're really dilapidated, they're really not functional. So in the fall of last year, I submitted an application proposing an activity envelope on lot 19. If we can go to the activity envelope drawing. And if you need a full scale one, I've got a paper copy here. Anybody wants to look at it, but this is a good representation of it. So the clients are keeping lot 18 for their own use and trying to get an activity envelope on lot 19 so that they can put it up for sale. And lot 19, the activity envelope was drawn to comply with the setbacks, the yard setbacks. So there's a 30-foot front, a 15-foot side, and a 30-foot rear. Because we're bringing the driveway in off of Glen Eagles Drive, we understand that that would be the front. So there's well more than 30 feet on that side, and there's 15 feet plus on the Maroon Creek side, and on the rear 30-foot setback would be on this side. So the 2 sides are basically the Maroon Creek side, and the back side are the side yards here because of where we're taking access from. The activity envelope was located in the most physically suitable place on the lot. So you can see the topo identified, and the green is 15 to 30. The yellow would be the areas above 30. And you can see there's just one small anomaly area that goes into the backside of the activity envelope. But basically, the entire envelope is the less steep portions of the property. It's really the appropriate place on the lot for a house to be built. And we thought we were in great shape when we submitted the application. And then it was pointed out to us that there is a 100-foot major road setback. that also applies to the lot. We had not taken that into consideration. That setback is drawn across the lot in red, so you can see what it does to the lot. It basically takes up about 2/3 of the lot. So the depth of this property is about 149 feet. And the 100 feet takes up, as I said, just about 2/3 of it. We've also got the 15-foot side yard setback on this side. So what's left here is about 34 feet in depth, in which to build a house and a garage and then the accessory structures and all of that.
Alan, I have a quick question.
Yes,
When was this 100-foot major road setback enacted?
about 15 years after the subdivision was created. So it's one of those that shows up in the 1976 Pickens County Code, the first time the code was actually in a books, the one that Dwight and Joe are well known for. So yeah,
I
it's,
can see this.
we don't have an exact date. Joanne and I have talked about it, but we know it's 75, 76, and the subdivision was platted in 1960. So yeah, you've anticipated one of the points that.
Yeah, I
that I'm
mean, it's
gonna raise.
created a postage stamp.
That's correct. So the shape of this lot and the presence of this setback have really created a hardship in terms of identifying a place to put the residence. It's kind of exacerbated by the fact that when you stand directly in front of this lot on Maroon Creek Road and look back this way, so you look back towards Aspen, you actually can see the ridge of Aspen Mountain behind the subdivision. And so any structure that is built in this envelope is going to have to not penetrate that ridge line. That's a given. The county will not allow us to penetrate that ridge line. So we're not going to be able to do a vertical house. This house is going to need to basically stay 1.5 stories. Obviously, it hasn't been designed yet, but we're pretty certain that to stay within the ridge line, we're going to have to keep it down. So that envelope that you're looking at there is about 12,000 square feet in area. Not only does it have to have the structures in it, but you know it has to have all the grading, all the landscaping, the turnaround area in front of the garage, all that stuff. The driveway obviously is outside of that, but the turnaround area would likely be inside of it. So we don't think 12,000 is a really ambitious ask here. We think we're asking for a reasonable envelope. The allowable floor area on this lot is about 4,500 square feet.
4,500
plus the subgrade space that you're allowed to build, but the countable above grade is about 45. So the envelope that we drew is set back 40 feet from the edge of the right of way. And that 40 feet is comprised of 25 feet here, this hatched area, as well as 15 feet of setback. The hatched area, we learned after our clients bought this property that there's a seeming overlap with Island Park. The surveyors who surveyed Island Park back in the day, a long time ago, somehow Island Park comes over to the other side of Maroon Creek Road. So we've excluded the hatched area from all considerations about this lot. We don't use it for floor area. It doesn't provide setback, but it does provide room to sit the house back. So there is 40 feet there, and the edge of the right of way is actually labeled here. So the edge of the Maroon Creek right of way is there. So you can see there's about 10 to 15 feet, about the same size as the actual setback between the edge of the paved surface and what is actually the Maroon Creek right of way. So the edge of the envelope is not 40 feet back from the edge of the pavement. It's about 50 to 55 feet back. So that's the effective setback. But the required setback here is 40 feet, and we're asking for a 60-foot variance from the major road setback. So the reasons that we think you should support it, Rick has the number one thing that I was going to say. Lot was platted in 1960. That's 15 years before the county enacted these road setback standards. It was imposed on this property well after it was platted. and it clearly was not taken into consideration when the plat was drawn. Diana, can you go back to the subdivision plat number 2? Yeah, right there, and pull out just a little bit. So as I mentioned, there are 6 lots along the frontage of the 20 that are right along Maroon Creek Road. Those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 19, and 20. Of those 6 lots, to my eye, number 3 is deep enough to put a house and not be within the setback. The rest of them are all about the same depth. They're almost on a vertical line with one another.
You show us the Google Earth, just to see.
Yeah, it's gonna come in a
Okay,
minute.
perfect.
Yeah, we'll come into it. So 5 of the 6 are about in the 150-foot depth. And so several of the owners of those lots have been before this board, before us, seeking variances from the setback. So in 1979, this board granted a variance for a new house on lot 20, which is the one just up the road from ours. That house is situated almost entirely within a 100-foot setback. And then they came back in 2017 and this board granted a 41-foot and a 67-foot major road variance for 2 existing non-permitted sheds. In fact, Mitch told me he was the one that represented it.
Yeah, that's my lot, by the way. Number 20 belongs to me. So
Great,
very interested in this conversation.
okay. So both sheds, as we understand, are located entirely within the 100-foot setback. And then in 2005, the board granted a 30-foot variance for an addition to the existing house on lot 4 of the subdivision, which is the just down the road from ours, located at 1072 Maroon Creek Road. And in fact, that entire house is situated within the 100-foot setback. Yes, now let's go to the GIS images, Diana. So number 5. So we've created this GIS or Google type image that shows the properties in the subdivision. And actually our client created this and he measured using the online tool, the distances from the edge of the road. And we've got 3 houses in particular that I would point to. The one on lot 20, which we measured at 36 feet back from Maroon Creek Road. The one at 1072 Maroon Creek Road, which is measured at 43 feet from the road. And then 30 Glengarry, which is 42 feet from Maroon Creek Road. So our 40-foot setback would fit right in the middle of those other houses in terms of where it's situated on the lot. The next image that we created goes further up the road to the base of Aspen Highlands. And you can see many structures in that area, none of which have a 100-foot setback. So I wanted to sort of focus on the single-family residences. There are obviously a number of multifamilies in that area, but the one at 1819 Maroon Creek Road is 16 feet from the road, 1501 Maroon Creek Road, 24-foot setback, 1889 Maroon Creek, 30-foot, and 1679, 50-foot setback. We think the pattern that's been established well before us is really pretty obvious. This neighborhood does not have a 100-foot setback from Maroon Creek Road. It just doesn't exist for the vast majority of structures. If you go backwards again to the previous one. Yeah, the Aspen Rec Center, a rather large structure, is 38 feet from Maroon Creek Road, and the Aspen Elementary School is 33 feet from the road. So it just doesn't happen anywhere along here. Tennis courts, just about everything. So we really don't think there would be a harm to the public from granting this variance, since the prevailing pattern is setbacks of under 50 feet from the road. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I'll turn it back to you, is that I was around and I was part of the team that created the activity envelope process for the county back in 2006. And the reason that the county staff wanted to create the activity envelope review process was to give landowners a way to determine where on their property development could occur without having to go to the expense first of having to design a house, create a site plan, and go through all that, and then have the county say, no, you picked the wrong place, do over. So the reason that we're in here, we're an activity envelope review. We don't have a house design, but the activity envelope is to allow our clients the ability to market this property. And frankly, the envelope that we've created complies with every standard of the code except for this major road setback. We're confident we put it in the right place. But there's too much uncertainty for any buyer to prepare a site plan, to have an architect design a house until they know if this variance is going to happen. Because if you're back in the very back of this envelope, you really can't do very much. So we think it's appropriate for you to be considering this variance for this envelope. We think we've demonstrated that we have a physical hardship, and we would ask for relief from that hardship through the variance.
Thank you, Alan. Nice presentation.
Thanks.
But I'm curious, you weren't on the community development when they created the 100-foot.
I came about 5 years
Look
later.
at me. Did you, were you on that?
I came in 1980. You know I love proposing regulations on land. That one's not mine.
Okay, do we have any comments from the neighbors? And if so, please identify yourself.
Kelly Carson and Ernest Sampson, we own number 20 and have owned it since 1992, by the way. We're very interested because it appears that we have very similar impacts that we're going to have come through the same process.
Right.
So I just have a question about your road, your entranceway in on Glen Eagle, not that I object. Are you going to do it in the same one that is there, or is it going to be
No,
closer to
it would
the
be
road?
before. Yeah, it's a separate driveway from the one that goes to 45.
Looks like it was close to the other way, wasn't it?
It's close to it, yeah. And, you know, there's no question we have to go through site plan review following this. We think we're close to completing the activity envelope process. We've gone through the noticing on taking the staff person out to the site on Friday. So we think we're going to be through that, but the buyer is going to have to go through site plan review, no question about it. And issues like the location of the driveway, the form of the house, you know, how it appears relative to the ridgeline, those are all going to be major concerns. You know, you're fortunate in your location because Glen Eagles, basically, there's a kind of a little ridge, if you will, between your house and this one. So I can't imagine you've seen this one.
Well, I was a little
But-
concerned about that, not that I would object.
Yeah.
But now that you said it's going to be mostly under and then just one story, but I
I
don't,
think it's gonna have to be. Again, we haven't designed it, so I can't certify to that, but if you look at the lot right now, there's a viewing platform there, and that's right in the envelope, and the viewing platform is definitely less than 2 stories high. And the very top of the viewing platform breaks the ridgeline.
it is at less than 28 feet.
Oh, I mean, I've looked at it. It's, yeah, that's not a 2-story. Yeah, I mean, you might stand up at it and feel like you're in the 2nd story.
I
But
would
it's not
go
where
there
the roof
and-
is. The roof's gonna have to be lower than that platform, because the platform, I stood there and I was like, oh, great, platform breaks the ridge line, that's a problem. So, yeah, the house is gonna have to be, it's gonna have to be buried in. It's gonna have to step with the grade, and it's gonna be buried into that kind of bowl that sits there. So I can't imagine you seeing it. But you
I don't
would be
think it would
affected by
break
the
view because
driveway.
We're up a little. I mean, I have looked at it that way and
Yeah.
looked at it to see because it would be in my direct view of Maroon Bells, and I always see a little bit of it anyway.
That's what everybody wants to see. That's what everybody
But
wants
I
to
think
see.
it'll be fine.
And again, you'll get noticed for a site plan, and that's when you really want to take a look at what's there. And you ought to make whoever's designed it put up story poles so that you're confident that it doesn't break through you. Because that's something that typically happens at site plans. We put story poles on.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, do we have any questions of the applicant?
No?
Seems straightforward.
No.
Fits the neighborhood.
Okay, I would entertain a motion. This looks like a typical downzoning of properties that were created. And I don't understand the philosophy behind the overreach of the county to apply a 100-foot setback, major road setback on properties that are already developed.
Well, this is a collective.
There's not one,
This isn't a
property
major
that's
road.
that's gonna.
It's also not. a
They
major
missed it.
road.
They meant-
Really, I don't understand.
Highway 82 is a major road. Buck Creek Road's a major road.
So,
If this were defined as a collector, it would have a 50-foot setback.
yeah,
And then we'd be talking something reasonable. But it was a meat cleaver approach to the problem, you know, there's.
well, I'm just happy you had nothing to do with this.
I had nothing to do with it.
Anyway,
I was still in college. In graduate school.
so, does anybody want to craft a motion to approve or not?
I'll make the motion. Oh, wait, I can't. Sorry.
This isn't the PNC Joe.
I'd be happy to, but I think the last one, so I want to give somebody else a turn.
Seth?
Yeah.
Take a crack at this?
You know, I've been on the board for a long time. This is the first one that I've seen that doesn't have a structure on it. So.
Yeah.
At a loss of words to craft it.
But the variance for a building envelope and the practical difficulty is the imposition of a major road setback that really doesn't apply to this area.
You nailed it.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a hardship that's created and a practical difficulty of creating a postage stamp building envelope. So, all right, that's a good motion there.
God, this
Thank
word
you.
is.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Aye.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And any discussion? Having heard none, we'll entertain, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Unanimous approval.
Wonderful.
Congratulations, Alan, Joe, guys, Diane, thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
And Kelly, I hope you're gonna be happy with whatever goes up there.
Oh, I think so, and I'm probably be next in year for a variance.
Probably 35 years ago, 40 years ago.
I didn't know you were that old, Rick. Was it the Gerber?
It was, yeah,
Gerber.
yeah, JP Gerber.
Mhm.
He was a good friend of mine, and they lost it within 2 years.
They lost it.
Went up their nose.
Oh, right.
What happened?
How good of a friend were you?
Enough to know the cause.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. If there's no other business.
You wanna do that
Joanna,
motion?
Joanna?
I'll make that.
All in favor? So signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joanna.